I'm really excited to introduce all of you to David today.
Hello.
David is the founder of Dads of Steel, and he had contacted me recently, and I'm not even exactly sure what it was that you had said. I forget right now, but he just introduced me to his work, and I really wanted to reach out and connect with him because I had been getting a lot of emails from people and comments from people really saying, there's nothing for dads, right? That really, as much as the experience of invisible motherhood is difficult, and it's almost hard to find really good resources for that. For the dads, it's even more so. And I've certainly encountered that in my own experience as well, is that um, there's not much out there for the guys. So when I saw David's work and I kind of familiarized myself with that, and he and I met up virtually to have a conversation, I really knew that I wanted to introduce him to my circle and my community because the voices of dads are so silent and absent in the circle in so many ways. And so I'll just share with you a little bit too. For those of you who aren't familiar, I'm April. I'm the founder of the Love and Loss Project. I'm a psychotherapist by trade, and I've been doing this work in my own world for about 10 years before I went through the experience of losing my little girl, Nora. And after taking some good chunk of time off from all of my work, when I returned to really working again, I knew that I needed to, and I felt compelled to really be focusing a lot on supporting other parents who have experienced infant loss. Because I most certainly had experienced firsthand the absolutely gruesome isolation and absolutely eh, indescribable devastation that we go through. And so I knew that I really needed to help share with other parents some of the things that I knew worked for me and worked for some of the other women and couples that I was supporting. And so that's really how the Love and Loss Project came to be. And so now I feel really grateful to really be able to be introducing you to other people who are also doing really great work in this field. So this is David Steele. David is the founder of Dads of Steel. But can you tell us just a little bit about what this is exactly, David? What is it that you do?
Sure. Dads of Steel is a community where we want to bring together other dads to inspire, encourage, motivate them to be, the best versions of themselves for their families. Um, I also, me and my wife and our family lost Aubrey Violet. Um, Here's a picture of
Mm,
um, Aubrey was born on May 28th, 2015. She was 1 pound, 10 ounces. She was 12 and 3/4 inches. Um, she was born at 26 weeks, so she was premature. Um, but yeah, this is our little Aubrey. Um, uh, so that's how Dads of Steel started. It's a huge community that we're trying to build for grieving dads and just dads to to be the best version of themselves for their families, whether they've went through child loss or maybe just the weekly struggles of working 50 plus hours, and they might have went into some poor choices and habits, to get them back on their feet. Because me personally, only seeing Aubrey for a day, um, you never know how short your time is with your child. So we're just trying to build a community of positive dads and stuff.
that's so neat. So one of the things that really stood out to me when you and I had talked before, David, was when you had really kind of shared with me a little bit about what some of that earlier time had looked like for you after you lost Aubrey Violet. Is it okay if you tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So kind of to peel the onion back a little bit, my wife and I were in the process of buying a house. Um, we just got married that previous July, and then I was working at the time at a residential treatment center with youth of behavioral and emotional disorders. Um, on May 28th, I was, got up, went to work. Um, at about like 9:30, I get a phone call. Hey, your wife's on the line. I picked it up. She said, hey, you need to come to the hospital now. We're gonna have Aubrey. Um, so the hospital was about 20, 25 minutes away. Went there, just having all these emotions go through your head. For me being a dad, the first time, I'm excited. I'm happy, but then I'm also nervous. Most cases, the wife's in, and maybe your family's there, and things go smooth, and you're able to hear your baby cry, and 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 hug your wife and kiss your wife. But unfortunately, that's not how it went for us with Aubrey. When I got there, I went up to the where Colleen was. Um, they delivered Aubrey. Unfortunately, we didn't even hear her cry. She was rushed to the NICU area, hooked up to a bunch of machines. Um, Later on, probably like an hour or so later, we were able to see her. Um, and unfortunately, she had like these glasses over her eyes, hooked up to a lot of monitors. Um, Being delivered at 26 weeks, she had a lot of complications. So, that was really hard to hear and hard to swallow. But yeah, it was that early on phase was tough. We thought, though, there was some positive light at nighttime. Um, at nighttime, before we went to bed, the nurse said, "Hey, her oxygen looks like it's getting better." We thought we were moving in a positive direction. So when my wife and I went to sleep, and then about 5:30 in the morning, the doctor came in and said, "Hey, we need to talk to you." Throughout the night, they had to resuscitate her several times, and her lungs at a 26-week-old, they were underdeveloped as they were. It just, she was having a lot of hard complications. The doctor said, we could keep on fighting for her and resuscitate her, but her organs were just slowly like shutting down. And I'll never forget this. My wife looked the doctor right in the eye and say, because at the time, you're not going to like Google a bunch of stuff like, what should we do in this situation? What should we do? What should we do? So, and my wife is huge on research, and she's one of the smartest people I know. But at that time, it was like crippling. You look at each other and you're in shock. You don't know what to say. You don't know what to do. And my wife looked at the doctor and said, "If this was your child, what would you do?" And he said, "If this was my child, I would just want to hold her and spend the last moments with her, and hold her and kiss her, and give her just give her a kiss, hold her, say your prayers, and share that time with your family. So we decided, we took the doctor's advice, and we got to hold her. And I don't know if you can see, there's a couple pictures of my wife holding her, and this one keeps me motivated. I'm giving her a kiss on the head. But yeah, that was definitely the hardest day of our lives. But yeah, I never would want anyone, even my worst enemy, to go through what we went through. And trying to juggle all those emotions. I mean, I think I was doing some research. I think the top 5 stressors in a lifetime or life events, losing a loved one is definitely one of them. Moving and buying a house is another one. And if it's not on the top 5, it's probably in the top 10. I mean, marriage can be tough as well. So at that time, we were trying to juggle all 3. And my advice to any dads out there that are listening is be supportive of your wife, and it's going to be a tough road, but you guys are in this together, and she's my rock. She is an unbelievable woman that had Aubrey with her for 26 weeks, and sometimes I think about that, and that affects me a little bit.
And even listening to, I think everybody who is on this call is just right in that moment with you, and really just going back to each of our own moments, right? Because really at whatever stage that was, or whatever point in time that was, that we had to say goodbye to our little ones in whatever form that took, that is the before and after moment in our lives, right?
Yeah.
That is everything else kind of divides at that point in time of everything then shifts.
Mm-hmm.
So, David, when you can you tell me a little bit, you had shared with me about that idea of that kind of man cave, I think was the word that you used, that you kind of went
Sure.
into during that time. What was that about for you?
So after we moved and picked up my wife from the hospital, she stayed in the hospital a couple days, and it was important for her to she wanted to any there's an option, I believe, that she was able to produce milk and kind of donate the milk. So she wanted to stay for a couple days and do that. But when we finally moved to the house, my mother-in-law in my little area had put up like some blackout shades, and I had my own like TV and couch in a man cave area. And that was my coping mechanism for a lot of the nights, a lot of the days. I had 2 weeks off. I only had 2 weeks off from work. But I would go in and binge watch Netflix TV shows, movies, a lot of sports highlights. And then with that was my comfort food. So I would be eating a lot of junk food, McDonald's, Burger King's, Euros, cheesecake.
And I think that kind of makes sense, right? Because I think, when you go through the loss of a little one, I'm assuming, that everyone on the line might be able to relate to this. Other things just crash and burn, right? Because you're like, well, what does it matter what I have for lunch today? Like the worst possible thing imaginable has happened. Or what does it really matter if the dishes are done?
Yeah.
This is not important, right? And so, yeah, I think we've all kind of been there. I just want to
Yeah.
let you know, because I forgot to mention this earlier, there is that chat feature as well. So if there's something that you want to say, or if you have a question, you can just hit that chat button at the bottom of your screen, And you can either send that to everyone, or you can address it privately to somebody else on the line, or to myself. I'm going to be checking that too as we go. Sorry, David.
No,
Yeah.
no. And that's the one thing I wanted to highlight here today. Was talking to my wife last night. Was a very emotional night. Just kind of talking about, you know, the past and how we remember, you know, how we grieve differently. Um, you know, my wife is in the teaching field, so she was pretty much done with school, and she had, you know, 3 months off, and I unfortunately had to be supportive of her and try to be strong, and I would say, you know, from my own experience, um, not try to understand why your loved one or the other person is grieving differently, because there would be times where my wife wouldn't want to leave the house for days. She'd be in her bedroom with the blanket that you know, Aubrey had in the NICU. Um, and you know, me, I there were times where I just wanted to shift my focus, and right when we came moved into the house, I remember painting like a whole half court basketball court in our front driveway, and it was just like I had to keep my mind focused on other things. Yeah, it was so yeah. That's something that I wanted to share with everybody, especially dads. You know, you guys are gonna grieve differently, and just support your loved ones because they need it. You know, yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and it's funny, right? Because as you say that, what just comes up for me, and tell me what your thoughts are on this, but I think that's also really, in some ways, that double whammy that I see that a lot of guys get hit with, right? Because on one hand, I lost my child too.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I know even just with my partner, really, the main thing that people would say to him half the time, more than half the time, was, well, how's April? Right. And so that whole piece around how he's doing or what he needs was almost totally eclipsed by this idea that his role is somehow just to support me, as if I'm the only one who went through this. And I
Yeah.
remember that like both kind of infuriating me. Yeah, it was awful because as alone as I felt in many ways, I also, was aware that in many ways it was even more so for him.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So I, hey, Crystal, is it Crystal? Okay. Um, you know, I, I would say how you support your husband.
I'm just gonna pause and I'm gonna ask you
Yeah,
this
sure,
in a different way if I can, David, if this is okay,
sure.
Crystal, because I think this might get to what you're looking for. What was the things that your wife did that really offered you the most? What was it that you did that she did for you that worked for you or that offered you something?
So, um, not to like jump too ahead, but kind of like just to give you our story and peel back some pieces. Um, you know, she would go to a lot of support groups, read. You know, she even told you. Remember, she would go to your lost page, and so there was a lot of things out there for women. Unfortunately, for me, um, I was like hesitant. I really didn't see any of these groups. I was hesitant at going to therapy right away. Um, but so she read a book called Rare Bird. I don't know if any listeners have heard of that. It's by Anna Whitstein Donaldson that really helped her. Um, and in the book and with the blogs, she would she would hear about, your child will give you signs still. And I didn't really know what that meant, but then I started to see through with Colleen, like there are signs that your loved ones are gonna be giving you. Um, so kind of like the turning point with me, and this, Crystal, I'm gonna answer your question here in a second. I'm just kind of building the background story. Um, so just like any dad or father, you want to support your family and do the best you can. So we had moved down south in Illinois, and I had a couple interviews lined up, and I really thought I nailed this interview, and it was going to be a great opportunity for our family, and it was for Aubrey, um, and our new house. And leaving that meeting, I was flipping through the channels, and I heard a song called "By Your Side" by 10th Avenue North. It's a Christian band. And in that song, I just felt like Aubrey was speaking to me, saying, "Hey, Dad, I'm by your side. I'm okay. Now it's time for you to be the man or be the person you need to be for mommy." And um, that was a huge turning point for me. And so, what worked for me is not going to work for everybody else. I know that. But that night, sports has always been a part of my life. And so I went to the health club that night, and I was about like just almost 260 pounds, like 40 pounds over the weight I was in college and stuff. And I went on the treadmill. I burned some calories. And at the end of my walk and run on the treadmill, I burnt almost like 500 calories. So in my head, I was thinking, you know what? I'm going to dedicate my workouts to my daughter. She was born on 5/28. Every time I go to the gym, 3 or 4 times a week, I'm going to go on the treadmill and burn 528 calories. I don't care if it's going to take 45 minutes, an hour. I'm going to dedicate those to her. So to answer your question, Crystal, when I need space, whether it be an hour and a half, 2 hours, um, you know, Colleen gives that to me, and that's a time for me to go, in my eyes, be with Aubrey, honor her, dedicate my gym workouts to her.
I think that's really neat. If I can just kind of jump in for a second, because I think that you're touching on something that I hear a lot about when I'm working with couples, which I've kind of noticed there's this phenomenon in that we give the support that we want. And oftentimes in our relationship, those are actually two different things, right? Like the support that we want is not necessarily the support that feels really supportive or good for our partners to receive. It's kind of like that same thing of, when you're going shopping, like for somebody's birthday present or something, and you're like, oh my God, I love this. I want to give this to Heather, right? But it's really like, I love it so much. I want someone to have this. I think we do the same thing in our relationships. And so one of the kind of the tensions that I really hear from some of the men and women I support is that, and I know that this doesn't apply to everybody. There's obviously lots of differences, but I've certainly noticed this trend where the guys want space. They want space. They want some quiet. They don't necessarily want to talk about it all day. And they kind of want to renovate the basement and organize the garage, right? And what I've seen is that's often a time where all these new projects kind of kick in, right? And for the women, I often hear women saying a lot of times to me, like, I don't know if my guy's okay. I don't know if he's coping with this well because he just seems to want to avoid this. And I think, it really is just a difference, right? That if I have this need to really want to talk about it, or to want to have you really hold me, or to really want to kind of play out that idea of like, what parts of this, when you picture, all the stuff we're letting go of, what are these moments of parenting that you're most sad about not being able to have, right? We really kind of, as women, we tend to kind of connect with each other based on almost those stories, right? And those intimate kind of details of our thinking. And for a lot of the men that I've seen, that's sometimes hard, right, to keep up with. That is sometimes hard to kind of hold this space with, because it almost kind of seems like, and I get where this comes from, it's a little bit counterintuitive, right? Especially from a lot of guys' perspective, to say, if my wife really starts going down this road, what if that just washes her out totally? What if it just takes her somewhere that she's not able to come back from? And so
Mm.
there's almost this kind of protective reflex to like change the topic, or kind of redirect that a little bit, or say like, whatever that is. And I see a lot of couples kind of get into this fight then, right? Which I think really is just, we give the support that we want. I don't know. What's your take on that? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so that's one thing that I definitely would highlight looking back. If I could tell myself or any dads out there, because you're going to have a lot of emotions going through you. And I didn't always want to talk about losing Aubrey, didn't always want to uh, bring it up. So I would shift the focus on other things that would bother me. Um, if the dishes weren't done, it wasn't a big deal that the dishes weren't done. I was hurting inside that I lost my daughter, and I would focus on, getting an argument with my wife about the dishes. So what I would tell any dad out there, that once it's tough losing a child, I'm sorry for all the listeners and watchers out there that have lost children. I'm definitely sorry for you and your families. Um, your wife or your spouse need your support, and then they need that positive encouragement. And if it's getting escalated and you feel like you're about to stir up a fight, please just walk away, or go to your man cave, or go take a drive and come back, because both of you are hurting. Both of you are hurting. So that's
Mhm. Well, and I don't know about everybody on the line here, but I can relate to that from my own experience as well, right? Just even over the Christmas holidays, I was so bitchy, right? Like I was so grumpy and like mean to my partner, right? In many ways. Like he'd be trying to help me with my luggage and I'd be annoyed. And it's like this strange phenomenon that it does sometimes come out of our loved ones, right? It does
yeah.
come out at really, the person who's right beside us and all of that. And it almost kind of took me a minute to catch up with myself and be like, oh, this is what's going on for me. This
Yeah.
really is a grief thing, because I just be, this person not super proud of, right? I'm cranky and complaining about travel schedules. I'm annoyed as he's literally trying to help me, right? And it really just is all of this kind of pent up emotion that just kind of sometimes becomes like that hot lava going through our blood, right? Where it's just the pressure of that is intense. And I remember kind of saying to him, because I had that moment of realizing like what I was doing, not the first day, but eventually I kind of realized. And I was like, you know, how do you actually like deal with this when I'm in this state? Like, how is this like fine for you?
Mhm.
And he's like, I don't know, because like, that's what he does. And I'm like, no, really, like I really want to know, like, because I know other people are gonna want to know this too. Like, seriously, how is it that you just managed to be fine with this or deal with this? And he was like, I just really practice telling myself that it's not personal.
Mm,
And I really practice just reminding myself of what this is about, really, because I think, those are the things that ends up being kind of the tension about the dishes, right? Or the tension about the driving. And
yeah,
so it's funny because those have kind of become, I think if we kind of look at our own story, we each kind of have our own key targets where that comes out. And so for me, like I've realized like, okay, now the next time that I am like picking apart his driving, that
mm,
is a good signal to myself that like something else is
yeah,
probably going on because he always drives like a maniac. But on these
yeah,
days, it drives me nuts. Right. And,
yeah.
and that's a different thing because otherwise we can just really get lost in, thinking it's a fight about the driving or a fight about the dishes.
Yeah, and another thing that was hard for us, and it's gotten a lot better, but so we actually buried Aubrey next to some of her family, Colleen's great grandmother. Um, Whenever we would drive to the cemetery to visit, we would always, or I would always bring up something that just was not relevant to the situation, and I know it was affecting my wife, and it was just, you know, that's another thing. There's going to be moments where something's going to trigger you thinking about, your loss, or and don't take it out on your spouse, and don't start a fight, because it doesn't hurt, or it doesn't help making her get more emotional, because the both of you are going to, we going to the cemetery to visit her, and put up a Christmas tree, or go put like a Halloween basket by her gravesite. Those are tough days, and those are emotional as it is. You know.
Well, and I think it's hard, right? Because really, when we're just in the moment, we don't necessarily even realize what we're doing, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that sometimes that fight feels justified in that moment. I am annoyed that you're
Yeah,
late to pick me up, right? Or
yeah,
I am annoyed about the dishes in the sink, right? Like all of this stuff feels really legitimate when we're in it. Um, and so on one hand, I'm kind of a big fan on like that idea of giving yourself permission for like after the fact, right? Because sometimes it's hard to catch it at the time. But if we can start to kind of raise that question of like, am I processing stuff? Yeah. So I'm just reading Crystal's comment. hmm And it can feel like, and this is kind of where it can, I think, sometimes really turn into this dance that we really get into in our relationships sometimes, where it really becomes this pattern of pursue and withdraw. And so if I feel like he's in the garage too much, right, or not dealing with this head on enough or talking about this enough, then what am I going to do, right? I'm going to lean in a little bit more and I'm going to raise the topic again, right? And when I become annoyed, I'm going to start criticizing and I'm going to start saying things possibly like, I don't think you're handling this well. You don't talk about this enough. I think you're just avoiding this, right? It turns into these like criticisms at our partner when really what we're trying to do is call them over closer to us because
yeah,
this is what we're wanting to do to connect. I want to talk about her to connect, right? We're really, he's kind of carrying the weight of his world on his shoulders sometimes, just trying to focus and do what needs done and hold this all together, right? And so, we do this thing where I end up pursuing, right? Or we end up pursuing with these little criticisms or these, which is really just a way of trying to pull them close. And then the irony is, the more I try to pull you close, the more you're gonna like step back and be like, "Whoa, chill out, girl," right? Like, give me some space here. And now we're in this chase, right? Like now we really are in this chase kind of thing. And I think if we're not careful, that can really kind of escalate and that we start telling ourselves a story about what's happening, right? Like she's just losing it and, nothing's good enough for her and I just can't make her happy and I don't know how to take care of her, right? This is too much. And she ends up telling a story of like, he's just being avoidant. He's not dealing with this. This is going to blow up in our face one day. Where really, I think this is just truly how each person tries to soothe their own self in this. And I really don't think that there is a better or worse system, right? We have a culture, and particularly, coming from the therapy field, we very much are like, we hear that discourse of like, you just need to talk about it, you need to talk about it, you need to talk about it, you need to talk about it. And I kind of have mixed feelings about that, right? Because on one hand, we need to talk about that when we need to talk about that, right? And I don't think that there's always this prescription that it really is a one size fits all kind of thing. I went through a stage really in my own experience where I literally felt speechless. I felt like there was not the right vocabulary that existed in this world to actually even be able to define and describe some of the stuff that I was having to process and some of the stuff that I was having to try to make sense of. And so, as you can imagine, that's super fun for the people around me who don't know if I'm okay or not. Because I remember, my partner even saying to me at that time, like, you're so quiet. I don't know if you're okay or not. And I was like, ooh, that's good to take note of, right? Is that
Yeah.
like, they needed information. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that. So, I'm just kind of curious, and if this is okay to ask this,
Sure.
what were the things that you found hardest to understand about how Colleen was taking care of herself through this? What were some of the pieces that seemed confusing for you about her reactions or how she was processing it?
Um, I would just, I was, I wouldn't say frustrated, but, um, Colleen, before this happened, really energetic, positive, um, loves singing karaoke. She's just upbeat person. And like you said, she just shut down completely. Like there were days that she wouldn't leave the bedroom, and um, I just didn't really quite understand that aspect. But because as men, like you said, we're like, all right, we're gonna take our mind off this. We're gonna go clean the attic, or we're gonna go, mow the lawn, and then do extra trimming around the house and this and that. And you know, I'm also one of those people that I feel like I want to, you know, be positive to others, and so for me to try to be like, hey, why don't we take a drive and we'll go out to lunch, or why don't we try to, this, and being shut down, no, I just want to stay in the room. Uh, that took a toll on me. Um, but yeah, you're not gonna know how the other person's grieving. I wouldn't say, try to understand it. You're gonna end up arguing. I don't. Yeah, it
Hmm.
was you know.
And I think this is a great example. And tell me if this doesn't fit for you, right? Or if I'm reading this wrong. But, as you describe that, and I hear you saying that really, as someone who really typically would operate as a very positive person, that change of scenery, that going out for a drive, that changing gears was really something that helped you to get through this, right? That idea of that distract ourselves, right? Let's get out and kind of do something and
Yeah.
experience something different than just being in here. And so that's that kind of gift that then you're trying to offer her in this moment. Here's this thing that works for me. I want to take care of you by bringing you along with this, by offering this to you. And
Yeah.
it sounds like she's like, no, I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
have
No.
energy for that. I can't do that right now.
Yeah. And that's, and that's part of the you know we're married, and that's part of the process that I really had to, at young in our marriage, I had to learn the whole, you know when you take your vows, be there for your spouse, through sickness and health. Like, I if she wanted a orange cranberry muffin from McDonald's, I would take my butt over to McDonald's and get her an orange cranberry muffin, and it, the bond, yeah.
Sorry, and I think that's kind of so relatable and so powerful, right? What you're talking about. Because I think this hard thing, right? And it sounds funny and people can kind of, you know, challenge me on this or let me know if you disagree. But there's times when I say to women, like, he needs a job to do. Like, just give him something specific to do. Like, tell him to hang the pictures or tell him to, like, what this really is. Because I think in some ways, um, it is those tangible, guys are tangible, right? It's concrete. It's oftentimes action. And I think sometimes for women, it really is that, like, just be with me. And then the guys are like, what am I supposed to do with you? Right? Like, what does that mean? And it's hard, I think, sometimes when that's not the way that you operate, it's hard to almost believe that that is going to actually offer somebody anything, right? What do you mean if I just sit beside you? That actually is going to make this better today. It
Mhm.
seems so flimsy sometimes, right? And so I think that's sometimes kind of what I see couples really get into too, is this thing of each person is so wanting to take care of the other one, but it almost is that thing of, I'm just not quite sure what that thing is. So I think it's hard, right? Because when we're kind of each going through our own thing, it's really challenging to say, like, here's the thing that would make me feel loved in this moment, or here's this thing that would make me feel like you're with me in this moment.
Mhm.
Because I think we also kind of do this thing where I think in some ways we've kind of been sold a strange bill of goods in a way. And that I think as a culture, we tend to kind of talk about these fantasies about if someone really loves me, then they'll know what I mean. Or if someone really loves me, then they will know what I want, right? Or they'll know why I'm upset.
Mhm.
And and I think, when we get into that, we're really confusing love with mind reading, right? Which is really
Yeah.
two very different things. And so I think it's hard because it kind of brings the onus back to us to be like, here's what support looks like to me. Support today is the muffin from McDonald's, right? Or
Mhm.
support today is you just sit beside me and watch this movie that I know you don't really like,
Right.
right? Whatever that is. So,
Um, yeah, I was gonna also touch base on, when we were talking last night, Colleen and I, she had shared with me. I know that looking out for the signs of your loved ones will help, but I didn't know. Um, she talked last night about how when she knew eventually she'd have to get out of bed, go out in the community and stuff, and she felt like this pressure, like she didn't want to leave the house because Aubrey's with her, but she read some podcast or something that said, she's always going to be with you. Just trust that, and just if it takes for you to say to yourself, hey, our child name was Aubrey, so she would say, hey, Aubrey, we got to go to the store today. Mommy's got to get ready. We're going to go to the store. um and I'm getting chills talking about this right now because I'd like to share with the audience probably about 3 or 4 signs that we're a Christian family, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but I can't describe these signs that have happened to us. So one of the very first times when Colleen went out into the community, she was looking for like a little bench to put outside our house where she wanted to like read books and just kind of have her own like area to read. And she had this vision in her head of what she wanted the bench to look like. it was one of those mornings where she was like, okay, Aubrey, mommy's got to take a shower, and mommy's getting dressed, and Aubrey, we're going to go to Home Depot. And she didn't find anything right away, but then she was like, oh, we could use your help, Aubrey, And then like right when that moment happened, like she found this bench, like the one that she wanted, the color she wanted, like this perfect bench that she thought in her head. So that was a story that she shared with me last night. I have a couple else that I wanted to share. We bought this Aubrey Bear. Aubrey's middle name was Violet, so it's Aubrey Violet. We do a lot of things with purple, so we bought this Aubrey Violet Bear.
Cute.
Things on it. So when my wife and I were blessed with another child on May 16th, 2016, Madeline. We took Madeline to go see Santa, not this past Christmas, but the year before. And when we got there, my wife was in a panic. I felt horrible. We forgot the Aubrey Bear to take a picture with our family. And right when we forgot the Aubrey Bear, there was a mom that yelled out to her child, "Hey, Aubrey, come here. Hey, Aubrey, come here." So these signs that your children are always going to be with you, if you're open to listen or hear those signs, they're always going to be with you. When I incorporate a lot of my workouts at the gym, like I had mentioned earlier, I dedicate, the numbers in my head are always like 528. So if I do 5 sets, I'll equal 28 reps. Well, one day I decided to shoot hoops and I wanted to make 28 baskets before I left the gym. And on one of my makes, the net just like shattered, and it was like not the whole net, but like one of the pieces of the net just like made a big rip. And to me, that was like another sign saying, "Hey, Daddy, Aubrey's right here with you, working out." This past Halloween, we were at the library, and my daughter was playing with the cardboard box, like a little Halloween thing that they'd set up. A little girl came over and started playing with Madeline. And the mom came over and said, "Hey, Aubrey, we got to get going." And, Aubrey's not that common of a name, so that was another one. But the last one that I wanted to share was, this just happened last Saturday. I take my little one to soccer practice. Basically just, her chasing a ball around. But in the age group of 18 months to 24 months, there's probably about 15 kids. And at the end of the practice, the coach says, "Hey, all right, everyone bring it together. I got stamps for you." Hey, Sam, we'll chat soon, man. I got your message. I would love to chat with you. Sorry. So at the end of practice, the coach said, I got stamps for everybody. Why don't you put out your hand?" And he had like probably 12 stamps to pick from. There was a stamp, a baseball stamp, and the coach was like, "Oh, we're a soccer team. We're not gonna do that." So he picks out a heart, and he stamps everyone with the color purple, and it was a purple heart. And you know what? I know, to some listeners that might sound goofy, but I feel like there's times where it's not like we take our guard down and not think about Aubrey, but for us, she's always with us. And she's going to continue showing us signs like that she's with our family and she's with us, and we'll see her again someday. But yeah, those signs, I I can't say anything but she's with us.
Mhm. It's powerful stuff. I remember before you and I had talked on Saturday, because you and I had that conversation right after that, and you're like, "This is the craziest day. This is what just happened before our call." I'm like, "How cool?"
Crazy,
Mm,
crazy.
so cool. So I just want to just check in and see if anybody has any questions that they want to ask. So you can either just type it here, or feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask it out loud if you like. But if anybody has anything that they're wondering about for either David or I, would be happy to just kind of spend some time with you and chat in on that. Just seeing if Amy has anything. Yeah, that's such powerful stuff. Well, and I think, part of what you're kind of allowing in that process of even just being open to looking for signs is, I think there's almost just this idea sometimes that it's not about whether it's right, right? It's not about whether this is 100%, exactly what's happening. I think sometimes it's also just that idea of this is the most compassionate thing. This is the kindest thing that helps me in this moment. And so it's just that kind of openness to anything that makes you feel a little bit better right now, anything that just helps soften some of this. Because just to kind of keep going from that, because that's one of the things that when I'm talking to people, that I really have come to see all the time, right? With every single person I've ever sat down and talked with about this kind of stuff, we have the layer of the agony and the pain and the overwhelm and the heartbreak itself. And then there's often this other layer that we add on top of that. Thanks, Sarah. I'll check into that just a sec. Which is really, what do I tell myself about what's happening here? And I think that's some of that self attacking stuff that grief does to us that is just making it even harder. That is just making it even harder. And so things like when we get into that kind of cycle of like, why did this happen to us? Or why did this happen to me? Um, or, maybe this was my fault. Or maybe my baby is just gone and there's absolutely nothing else that exists in this world. They're just gone. But I think, what we're partly doing in that is the self attack, right? That just adds on this whole other layer of hurt on top. So part of what I really work with people on is this idea of starting to notice, what is the story about what I'm telling myself in this moment? And what is the story about what I'm telling myself about how I'm doing in this moment? And it's that really, I think, allows us to start to get our footing and start to carry ourselves through this a little bit. So I'm just going to look at the questions here. So it says, what are some of the ways that you connected with your partner? All right. So, David, what are some of the ways that you've connected with Colleen through this?
Uh, just to be open, Colleen, as much as we're just different in ways. And when she would be coping or wanting to, do a date night and want to go to a specific restaurant, I would just say to be open to your spouse, not always be the one picking where to go, be there. Like I said, you got a million things going through your head, but if you're going to try to disconnect and go out for dinner and your wife's really set on trying this new Thai place, but you don't eat Thai food, you know what? Suck it up. Try something different, or be supportive. I know that was like a little short story with us. Um,
Well, it's just that
doing
neat idea of what I hear you saying, and that is this neat idea of focusing on the bigger goal, right? The bigger goal is not really what I feel like having for dinner. The bigger goal is that this is an investment in taking care of my partner right now. And I think that's a two-way street, right, for all of us. Um,
Yeah, and it's really, so this is something that, you're never gonna get over. We talked about that last night, Colleen and I. Um, it's been now almost 3 years, and just this past couple weeks, Colleen's been going to the gym and trying to get back into to just some kind of physical activities. And last night, it just felt good. I prepared a dinner for her when she got home, and just to hear that, like, hey, it felt good to, go to the gym, come back, dinner was served. Um, Taking that stress off of your spouse
mhm.
could help too.
And it makes me think a little bit about this idea. So sorry, there was just a second part to the question that I didn't see initially. So it said that things that they used to do, right, which I think is what happens for all of us, those things that you often used to do to connect with each other
Sure.
really aren't realistic right now, right? And so when I think of even just some of the things I used to do with my partner and for my own self before I lost Nora, I would like to go out and see my friends, right? I'd like to go out for dinner. I'd like to go out and, kind of be out and about. And for me, what I kind of found was that, and like what you kind of described with Colleen, there was this period where it was like, I do not have the energy to go out and deal with the outside world right now. I don't want to go out and be greeted by a super excited waitress right now who, feels like life is great when life is not great, right? Like, I did not want to have any of that kind of almost surface level kind of crap, right? Like, was kind of my mindset at that time, in the sense that it's painful, is this painful juxtaposition of when you're in this dark place of devastation, that some of those things don't feel soothing anymore. And I think of it in the same way that, when you're in like a bad mood and a super peppy song comes on, we instantly change the station, right? Like, that's just when we're in a really angry mood. I want to listen to like almost angry music in that moment, because it's got to kind of almost line up. And so this is hard because I think in some ways, um, it forces you to both kind of cocoon a little bit at times. Um, and I think the other thing that comes with that is some of that navigating that social pressure from other people. So I just want to pause and just go back to my thought. So I think sometimes it's even finding different things to do at home, right? Where maybe you light a candle and for me, lighting a candle is sometimes just a way that I acknowledge and keep Nora with me in that symbolic kind of way. And you get out like a board game, or you get out Scrabble, right? Or you just kind of allow yourselves to downshift into just a little bit of a quieter space. And then I think the other kind of wave that comes with that is having to navigate what that means sometimes with our friends and family or colleagues who want us to be out and about, right? And for them, it feels like the best thing we could be doing right now is coming out to this cocktail hour, right? Or coming out to the event that they're hosting at their house this weekend. And you're like, there's so much pressure to just revert back to, whatever it was that we used to do. And so I think this idea of really just almost making it conscious, right? And making it, and what I mean by that is kind of just owning the intention that this isn't just a default setting that we're falling into. We're kind of just respecting, for what our family needs right now, that's not necessarily coming in and playing 9 holes of golf with the whole group, right? Like, or whatever that is. And I think that when you can really kind of just have that conversation with your partner directly, of what does feel comfortable right now. What are those kind of trigger spots? What are those places that you're dreading and you don't want to go to? What are those places that you're nervous about going to? Because I know for a lot of people, that's also, some of this family stuff or friend stuff becomes really hard because, especially if other people are pregnant around you or other people are having new babies around you, there can be so much pressure to just get over this, right? Which is a
Yeah.
complete crock and a myth, and just go back and function like your usual self. What's your
And
take
to
on
and to add on that, um, if you're with your wife or your partner, loved one at the grocery store, and your wife sees other kids run around the store, or maybe another lady pregnant, and she gets emotional, just give her a hug. Stop for a second, grab her hand, give her a kiss on the cheek, hold her tight, um, because that has definitely happened in our lives. You know, we wanted to pass out Halloween candy, um, that following fall after Aubrey had passed, and that was tough. We were seeing a bunch of you know families with their kids and stuff like that, and and that's definitely going to happen. Um, but just be there for one another, um, because you both need it.
so I just asked another question. It just says about how do you, sorry, I'm just taking a look at a second. Well, and let me just kind of come back to you for a second, David, because you had kind of shared a story with me. So I know it's okay to share this on the line because you and I had talked about this.
Mhm.
But about really how you went and did some counseling work. Can I ask you about that? What was that like? What made you decide to, well, what was that like for you to do?
Um, I'm sorry. I was reading
Cool.
some of my uh, the chats, and I apologize. I was reading some of those. Can you ask the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course. I know it's a fun kind of multitasking thing. So I was just asking, and I had said that I know that this is okay to share because you and I had talked about sharing this part here too, about your experience of going to counseling. What was that like for you? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So initially, I did not want to go. I was bitter. Um, Initially, I wanted to be there for my wife, but when we went, um, it wasn't something. I wanted to keep all my feelings and all my emotions, and I thought just going to the gym was good enough for me. Um, but after some time, and what I would recommend for anybody, because this is what helped me, is through the grieving process. I know personally what I did is I picked up some other bad habits, like the junk eating and the being lazy, and um, maybe not being the man or person you need to be. Um, and you go back to some, I would call them maybe like vices that are just comfortable to you, that would make you feel better, but ultimately it would hurt your spouse, or just make you kind of decline, if anything. Um, so I really had to look in the mirror, and I went to individual therapy first, and in so many ways that has just helped me, and made me a better person. And there are licensed professionals out there that have read and worked with so many people that my therapist Tom, he I look forward to go. I only see him twice a month now. I used to see him once a week, but I really look forward to going to therapy and just having a great conversation with Tom, and he's helped me in a lot of ways. And our family therapist David has really helped Colleen and I too. So So any dad out there, or any person that thinks, because I was that same person. I 100% was that same person. Therapy, stupid. Therapy, I don't need it. I'd get all defensive, this and that, blah, blah. I'm looking in this camera right now saying, hey, I was there. I know the feelings and emotions you were going through. But if you have insurance and you're able to just go, give it a try. It's
Well,
helped us out. Yeah.
and I think that's so important. And I think, for me, and obviously I'm a little bit biased because I am a therapist, and this is the work that I do, and I clearly really believe in the power of it. But for me, even before I went through losing Nora, it always kind of almost surprised me when I talk to people who, and I don't mean this, in any kind of offensive way, but it sometimes surprised me when I met people who are a little bit reluctant to going and doing counseling. Because to me, I was like, okay, I've got a dentist that I go to see to take care of my teeth. I've got a mechanic that takes care of my car. I've got my chiropractor that takes care of my funky hip issue I have going on. Why would I not want to sit down from time to time and really just have this carved out space and time to look at really my own goals, my own wellness, and just where I'm at and where I want to be? And so, for me, I feel like there's this kind of split, right? Sometimes, and even in kind of the therapy world, where I sometimes encounter this almost idea that I think of, and I don't mean this to be offensive, but I think of it as almost being this like 1950s kind of idea that like we only go to therapy if we absolutely hit rock bottom or we absolutely hit this wall and I truly cannot function or I can't do this on my own, right? That whole kind of rhetoric that we hear, like you really need help, you can't do this on your own kind of thing. And I think that, for me, because I went to counseling as well after I lost Nora, because I remember just thinking about it as, I'm trying to almost build a table, right? And I want to just stack my foundation
Mhm.
with anything that I can that is just going to help keep me as solid as I need to be. So, like, calling for counseling was kind of one of the first things that I did when I kind of came to. Um,
Mhm.
and that said, I definitely always talk to people about the idea of good fit because I think, we've all heard those stories of people that have said that I've gone to a counselor, I didn't get anything out of it, it was a waste of my time. I think the truth is sometimes that happens. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that person, is a bad therapist. Maybe they're great for somebody else. Maybe they're not, who knows? But they're not great for you, right? That there really is just that thing that there's got to be that good fit. Because I think really, yeah, I mean, clearly I've just witnessed the power and the transformation and the goodness of it. So for me, I'm always sad, right? Like I am truly sad when I, get an email from somebody and they say, I'm interested in working with you. Um, but you know what, I can't afford it right now, or, it just feels too big to come and do this right now. And I just think like, the stuff is not always easy, right? Like sometimes it is a bit of an investment. And sometimes it is inconvenient. But I think like, my God, like we take better care of our cars sometimes than we do of like our own personal well-being. And yeah, and I think sometimes that's just really tragic. And I think some of that kind of comes down to um, some of these old kind of outdated myths that I only
Yeah.
go and do counseling if I really, have no choice because I'm hanging by a thread. And I think that's a hard road. I think that just makes a hard road even harder.
Yeah.
So
And if, if it's hard for you to not maybe want to do counseling or therapy right away, I would encourage you to check out the Dads of Steel website. All one word, Dads of Steel, Steel, STEELE.com. We have we're building a great community of dads, and we share a dad of the week every Tuesday. And a lot of those dads, one of the questions is, what is a challenging time in your life where you had to rely on your faith, or where you needed to just rely, bond with your spouse. So those are some helpful messages from them. My wife and I on Facebook, it's a secret private group, but we have a Grieving Dads chat room that any listeners out there, dads that want to join, just inbox or message the Dads of Steele page.
Can you
And,
type that, David? Can you just like literally type that in the chat box so people can
yeah,
see, even if that's just your email address and your
yeah,
website? Cool.
yeah, sure.
Because I think that'd be handy for people to have right there. Yeah, and I just want to add on as you're doing that.
And then and then for those of you that maybe were a little late and didn't hear the full story, it shares my story and how I kind of wanted to formulate Dads of Steel. I just I was blessed to honor my daughter and be in a men's health magazine called the Belly Off Club that I dedicated that to her. And after that was published, something inside of me just said, okay, I know there has to be other dads out there that are grieving, that need support. And just to clarify, like, Dads of Steel is not just about working out and being fit and this and that. It's just about building this community and helping each other out. Because like we had mentioned before, it's hard for dads to find any support. So, the people that are, we're in the Chicagoland area, but, we're looking to throw some events and just kind of build that grieving community. I found out Kelly Farley that you had talked about, him and I have been kind of messaging back and forth. We're looking to possibly do a workshop, but for the dads out there that don't know, Kelly Farley wrote a book called The Grieving Dads. There's just a lot of positives, and I don't want someone to think just because the play on words is Dads of Steel strong, but I feel like we gotta be strong together, and when you're having a hard day, go on the chat room. Sometimes when you express either through words or through typing, it's a release. And, I would encourage any dads to do that, because that's helped me. For me, it's been going to the gym or listening to her song By Your Side by 10th Avenue North once a day. That gets me to be able to function.
Very cool. And I just want to read this question that's up. I'm just typing the name of the song there too, so people have it. And I typed in the name of the book by Kelly Farley so that people can access that, because that's truly one of my favorite books, I think, that's out there. So the question is, the person saying that they had gone to couples counseling with their partner after going through loss, and their husband didn't want to continue. They've been going by themselves since, and they are wanting to try to get their partner to come back and do therapy with them, but he isn't really wanting to go. So I'm just going to kind of address that for a second if I can, and then I'll get your 2 cents on that,
Sure.
David. But for me, I would get really curious about what made him decide to stop continuing. Because for me, when I hear that, it could be a couple of things, right? But one of my concerns is I think people stop going either when their needs have been met or when it's not useful. And so my kind of question would be like, what made him decide to stop? Was he not really getting anything out of it? or in which case that's hard to get motivated to go, right? I'm not going to go and sit somewhere for an hour just for the sake of sitting somewhere for an hour. So that would kind of be my question. And then the other kind of thing is, potentially, was there a concern for him that came up? Was this feeling like this is kind of going too fast or too far? Was he worried about how you were doing? Was he worried about what was the worry there? So I'd get really curious about what made him decide to stop going and what his concern would be about going back. The other kind of option is, I think, sometimes emphasizing that there is just such thing as good fit. I share that really every time that I sit down or I do a virtual session with people, because I would never want to risk that somebody leaves my conversation with them and feels like therapy just doesn't work, right? Or maybe I'm just not the right person for you. Um, because I think that's tragic when that happens. That I talk to people and they say, I tried counseling like 5 years ago. I didn't get anything out of it. You really should, right? Like that's kind of the whole point. You really should. It should feel like it's been a good use of your time and money and energy to do it. Um, And so the person saying that he was feeling that it made him feel worse to talk about it so much because it brings up so emotions. Awesome. So firsthand, that is amazing that he is sharing that with you, that he's been able to identify that for his own self, that really the thing that made him stop going was it was making him feel worse to talk about this because it brings up so much emotion. And that makes sense. But then what that tells me is that we really need to slow down the pace and that the therapist really needs to hear that this almost is going a little bit farther or deeper than he knows how to swim in that depth of water right now, right? And so we need to really just slow that back down. um, and that other kind of piece, I think, whenever we're often doing this work, is really cushioning this with really kind of the coping strategy stuff around that, which always sounds like such a strange word, right? Like when we say coping strategies, it almost sounds like so mechanical. But really, what we're talking about is just how do you get yourself grounded again? How do you kind of just help yourself to change gears? Because some of these things that we're talking about, none of these things are bad in and of themselves, right? If I need to distract myself from some of the pain and my grief for a moment, sometimes that's an extremely functional need that's being expressed here. I need a break from feeling awful all day. That makes a lot of sense, right? So it's not that any one of these coping strategies are bad. It's just if all you've got a hammer is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail, right? So we need to kind of bring in a few different things around that. And then the other thing that I do when I talk to people about the idea of bringing somebody in for support for their own selves, that is rarely ever going to work, right? If I sit down, with my partner and I say, here's my concerns about you, here's the things I think are wrong with you, here's the things that, even if I feel like I'm being super gentle and nice and clever and how I put that to them, we're all going to get our back up pretty much instantly, right? But because I think that's kind of just human nature. It's hard to hear. Sometimes I talk to people and they say, I was talking to somebody the other day and they said that they had, sent their partner a message that said, you need therapy and you need medication, right? Like, what are the chances that he's going to go and do anything with that, right? Like, all he's going to do is be offended and hurt, as any of us would, right? We're basically saying that he's being crazy and he's not coping well, or he's not doing this right. So instead, I really kind of like the idea of owning your own need that's being expressed, even in this desire for him to come to counseling with you. That is your own need. I, as much as we're concerned about the other person, right, and everything that you might be concerned about might be 100% valid, and what's making you even think that that person needs to come to counseling, you're probably right, right? You already know you're right on that. But I would own, I have a need for you to come to counseling with me. And this would really help me a lot if you came to counseling to support me. Because I find that really when we invite our partners that way, for instance, my partner and I, we still do couples counseling, really because I do not want to take better care of my car than I take of my relationship. So, really, kind of about once a month, and it varies. Sometimes we don't do this and we won't do it for a while, and then we'll go back and do it again, where we'll go like once a month, just kind of to like take good care of us. Did he want to go and do that? No, right? Like my partner is a military dude. He's as
Mm.
type A personality as you can get. He does not really, he's not a, as much as he's a very loving man, this is not his comfort zone, right? Like this is not what he would be doing in a million years. Um, really, I say, this is for me. I like,
I
God,
if I could add something to that, um, kind of a similar situation. Colleen found that um, near us in Naperville, Illinois, they do a walk to remember once a year. And I know a lot of listeners are throughout the whole country or world, but I think what helped me was just like that dad was feeling not wanting to go to therapy and it was too much of an emotional thing. I was really not wanting to go to this walk to remember. My wife had shirts made, purple shirts, and I, the feelings that I was feeling, I wouldn't say I was embarrassed. I was just, you know, it's just tough. But that was probably one of the best things that I did, and I would advocate for any listener that's a dad that's going through those feelings is when you go to an event like that, there's a lot of people that are right there with you, and you're going to get that sense of like comfort. You're not the only one that's dealing with this. Other people are dealing with this. You're going to see people cry. You're going to see people support their loved ones with, um, shirts and signs. And I think that event opened me up to like, okay, well, since I'm not the only one dealing with this, maybe I'd be more open to going to therapy, so that would be something that I would recommend. It might not be therapy right away, but go to, a grieving, a walk or because initially another hard thing, what I know I wanted to touch base, and it is normal to feel this way, is, in the past, um, when we had just lost Aubrey, I might be at the gym or out to eat, and I'd have a conversation with someone, and the conversation would lead to, oh, so how long you been married? Do you have any kids? And initially, I really didn't want to share with this person that I just met, at the gym or wherever, my story. But that has been like a good release for me to say, when I meet someone and they say, oh, great to meet you, do you have any kids or what's your situation? And I say, yeah, we have a daughter that's in heaven, and we have another daughter right now. She's about 19 months. But whatever's comfortable for you, because initially that was hard. And even with family and friends, um, they're always going to be a part of our lives. And there was a time around Christmas that someone was saying a prayer, or someone was talking about the whole family. And I know it really hurt my wife's feelings because um, they didn't say Aubrey's name. And however you want to deal with the loss of your child, that's up to you. But and how we're dealing with it is we're feeling like she might not be physically here, but she's here in spirit, and she's listening to us and stuff like that. So to some people where it might be uncomfortable, but we'll give Aubrey Bear a kiss goodnight before bed, but that works for us.
Mhm. I think I just want to tell people too that if you have a question, you can also send that to me privately. So if you just go down to the chat, you can just hit my name on there and send it to me privately as well. And then that way I can keep your privacy with that. But I just want to add on to that too, because I think, one of the things that has been really helpful for me when it comes to that question of, hey, do you have kids? Or any of that kind of stuff that really touches on my little girl, Nora. The thing that I do, and again, truly different things work for different people. Before I answer that question, I just check in with myself and I ask myself this question. I ask myself, do I want to have an emotional conversation with this person at this moment in this setting? And if it's a no to any one of those 3 points, then I give myself permission to opt out and change the topic and not talk about my little girl. Because that's one thing for me that I just found I didn't always have, and I still don't always want to bring my daughter into a space that may or may not feel really super respectful. And sometimes, I don't know if people encounter this, and you probably encounter this all the time, David. Sometimes I don't want to take care of somebody else's reaction, right? Like sometimes I don't want to have to make anybody else feel better about my sad story. So there's times when I might opt out even for that reason, because I think we've all been in that experience perhaps where you tell someone about what's happened to you, and then, oh my goodness, now I'm having to calm you down, right? Like, or I'm having to tell you it's fine. And ugh, ugh, who wants to do that? Some days, right? Or it just kind of takes a conversation to a place that I don't want to go for whatever reason that is. So to me, I kind of think of things, and I know in some ways, as much as I do very public work and share a lot with this community, in my own world, I'm also very private. I've come to notice, right? And so there's times where I just allow myself to opt out because this doesn't feel like a sacred enough space to tell the story of my little girl standing in this aisle beside the bananas and the apples. So there's times when I just give myself that permission to opt out. And I think that, just takes some of that pressure off, because I think one of the things that happens, and again, you really have to find your own way for that. Clearly, David and I have different ways of that at times. Um, but it really is just this permission of kind of trial and error of finding what does feel comfortable for you. And there's times when I will take on the role of an educator, right? Which I think that really, by nature of having to gone through the loss of a baby, this is such a taboo topic in our culture that in so many ways, like what you encountered with the family that didn't mention Aubrey Violet's name, we're having to educate people sometimes about etiquette and sometimes about what our hopes and expectations and what the right thing is to do. Because unlike, I use the example that unlike when my uncle died, people, there's not really a protocol for this, right? There's not really a protocol when we lose a baby fairly early on, because I could be wrong, but I would be willing to bet that when we lost a family member who's 30 or 40 recently, that name gets included in the list, right? When we're doing our moment of acknowledging the full circle of this family. And so often what happens is when we lose a little one, especially for people that lost them during pregnancy, there's not an acknowledgement, right? We're kind of breaking this taboo of even just talking about our babies some days. And so there's times when I'm aware that I'm wearing the hat of an educator and then I'm having to teach people what etiquette looks like, right? And I'll do that nicely, right? 99.9% of the time. Um, but yeah, that is kind of the hat we end up wearing, which is a lot of work, right? So there's times where I give myself permission to not have to do that work. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, David. You were going to say something else.
No, everyone is going to handle it differently, and there are moments, that I've chose not to tell people, and like you said, maybe it's just one of those days where you're not wanting to go down that that road. But I would say too, another, um this might be off topic a little bit, but I know during the day there's times where like I'll think about that day or think about Aubrey, and I wouldn't say I shut the door on those thoughts, but to function, um you can always come back, but that helped me a little bit, like to open up the door, think about
Mhm.
her,
Mhm.
acknowledge her, say, whether you pray or whether you just have a moment with your loved one, um but then know that she's always with you. you know um yeah, it's
Well,
tough, and those of you that just recently lost loved ones, I truly am, sorry for your loss, and I'll say a prayer for your families and stuff, and I'm sorry.
mhm. Yeah. I just want to echo that, right? And really for everyone on the line as well. Whenever it was that you went through this, I think we all feel that, and my heart breaks for every single person here because this is quite the road to have to walk down, right? This is the place that nobody, right? No parent should ever have to find themselves here, and yet, here we are. It's hard stuff, really hard stuff.
Yeah.
I just want to check in because I'm just a little bit aware of the time. So, if anyone else has any questions that they want to ask, now would be a really great time to do that. Um, and I just want to go back to one thing that you were saying, David, because I think that piece too, right? Around there's times uh, when I allow myself to turn this off, right? I think that is such an important thing to note, right? Because I think one of the things that makes it so hard to maybe not talk about our baby when we're asked if we have kids, or to get up and leave that bed when we're having a bad day, is I think as parents, it can sometimes feel like we are betraying our little one if we don't talk about them in this moment. Or we're
Yeah.
betraying our little one. Something I hear a lot from other parents is that, and I can certainly relate to that at a time in my experience as well, which is, if I caught myself laughing again, I felt really guilty about that, right? Or I suddenly felt really nervous about, like, are people going to judge me if they see me having a good time here? Or
Mhm.
are people going to get the really mistaken belief that this is just over and I'm fine now, right? When that might have just been a moment of relief for you, or a moment when you're starting to notice yourself come back to life again in this different way. And so what I really encourage people to think about is that, like what you had said at the beginning, David, one of the things that really has been most helpful to me is this realization that I do believe that my daughter would want me to be happy again. I do believe that she would want me to experience the sensation of being alive again. Because I think, for all of us here, we kind of know that feeling that it almost feels like you're in between being dead and being alive, right? Like the depths of that awfulness and pain and darkness.
Mhm.
It's a state of kind of half alive, right? And so, I realized as I was kind of just making decisions in a way about how I wanted to move through this. Because for me, I feel like one of the things that was helpful, and so one of the reasons it makes this so important for me to kind of share some of this with other people, because I had worked with because I'd worked with so many clients before I lost my little girl. I knew the depths that this truly is a before and after moment in our lives, right? Like I knew that it doesn't get much bigger than this, that these truly are the experiences that change us. It just does. And so I felt kind of grateful in that my work had really had that so front and center as part of my daily life that when I went through the worst thing possible, I knew that. I knew that this was a before and after moment. And so I remember just at one point in time having the realization that if I self destructed, if I just quit functioning totally and became this angry, bitter version of myself from this point forward, that was going to be the story that would be told about my little girl from this point forward. That would become my daughter's legacy, right? Which is some version of like, April was fine and life was good until Nora happened. And I was like, oh, like that realization just hit me one day like a ton of bricks. And I was like, you know, there are so many parts of parenting that have been absolutely stripped from me. But here's one moment that I can take care of my little girl. I will allow myself to start to return to life again for her. And it was that thing of for her that gave me the push that I needed to get out and go to yoga that day, right?
Mhm.
Or to call up my therapist or whatever that was. Because otherwise, that dark place, as awful as it is, there's something about it that feels like closeness to the ones that we lost. So this is such hard stuff. My last question for you, David, if I can, is just what is one last thing that you want everyone here today to know before we wrap up?
Um, that the dads out there, they're not alone. Um, I know this is a very touchy subject, um, but I was talking to a coworker the other day, um, that you know we're not the last people that are going to lose children, and we definitely weren't the first people that have lost a child. Um, and my heart goes out to each one of you that have lost kids. Um, but to build that support group, because you're going to need it. You're going to need it individually. You're going to need it together as a couple. And that's why I'm so focused on Dads of Steel is because I know Aubrey's looking down, and she, she's going to be proud of her dad, because I'm going to build a community of dads that need help. And um, we're just scratching the surface right now with this. But, I'm sure there's a lot of people that maybe were hesitant of joining the chat. But, if you know others that need help, have them go to our page, reach out, join the Facebook grieving page, because your child wants you to be better. And what I got from the little signs with Aubrey is, Dad, you used to be this type of person that was involved with all these sports and was in good shape and this and that, and you really did let yourself go. But you know what? She's in good hands now, and when the timing is right for everybody, um, I'm not saying it has to be working out. It could be, if you're a mechanic, or if you're in a certain trade. you know our slogan at Dads of Steel is being the best version of yourself for your family. And that is the family in heaven that is always going to be with you, and that's your family here down on earth. So you know but also there's going to be times where you're going to need, like we talked about early in the conversation, you're going to need a mental health day. There's been times at my job where I wake up and maybe I had a bad dream about Aubrey or about the situation, that I knew, you know what, today's a mental health day for me. I'm going to take a day off and reflect. And, if I need to sit in a room, and shut the door and just have some quiet time, or take a mental health day for your wife if she needs your support. And don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to help and share stories, and through a very tough thing that's going on in each of our lives, try to find some kind of positive light, and I think after chatting with everybody and seeing some of the responses, I think I'd like to maybe build a page on our website of like sharing your signs, because I feel like that's so important. Everybody's going to have different signs, and I would be encouraged to listen to your stories and stuff. So feel free, David at dadsofsteele.com. Shoot me an email, go on Facebook, Instagram. We're all a family. We need to support each other. And April, thank you for allowing me to be on. And once again, I'm sorry for all your losses. But we're gonna get through this, and we can stick together and try to be the, as tough as it says, as tough as it for me to say, like, be positive, try to have that loved one in the back of your head, and just be the best person you can be for yourself. So
I love that. And I just want to kind of add, I think, that idea too, that really our best is going to look different from one day to the next, right? There's going to be some days where that is drastically different from one day to the next. And even for me, when I kind of made that commitment to myself that I'm going to return to life for her, I'm going to work to become a better version of myself for her. It's not that I felt like I knew how to do that at that time, right? Like I still didn't feel like I had a clue how I was actually going to put that into practice at that time. I just knew that this was the direction that I needed to turn. And so this is where I think it's also so neat to connect with David and reach out for the supports that feel right for you, and surround yourself with just really as much as you can, because you do deserve this right now. Right. And I think for so many of us, it's not comfortable to receive. We all kind of, what I've come to really believe, most of us are so much more comfortable giving than we are receiving, right? And so how many times do you even have people say to you, like, hey, can I come and do this for you? Or hey, let me know if there's anything you need. Or hey, is it okay if I drop off this for you? And how many times, or how are you really? And how many times do we just go like, oh, no, I'm fine. No, don't worry about that. It's totally good. No, don't worry about it. No, you don't need to bother yourself to do that. Right? Like, and I think, the reality is we all do this just kind of instinctively. And yet the irony is, if this table were turned and if it was David and I being like, hey, could you help me with, right? Like we would all jump in there, no seconds asked, when the shoe's on the other foot. So I think it's so cool that you each really have dedicated this time today to really just giving yourself this little bit of cushion. I hope that that's what that's felt like for you a bit today, a little bit of understanding. And I really thank you so much for sharing this space with me. Yeah, I just really feel honored and privileged to be in this space with all of you. I know it's not an easy place to be. Oh, and actually, I would love to invite you all. Tuesday is January 23rd, and that is the day that I lost my little girl. And what I do on this day is a wave of love. So I'm asking everyone to perform an act of kindness in memory of your lost little one. And the idea is that really, for lack of a better way to describe it, it almost becomes like this confetti that just kind of goes everywhere with all of these random acts of kindness that for me is just one small way, but a way nonetheless, that I can allow what I believe was honoring the light that was my bright-eyed little girl by sharing just a little bit of light and love and goodness in the community. That in this small way, my community is just slightly better because she was here. And maybe that's just as simple as me buying coffee behind the person who is there behind me, because who knows what kind of ripple effect that's gonna create. Or maybe that's me leaving a really big tip for, the person who's busting their butt at Tim Hortons right now and their wages have been cut, right? Like whatever that is. So I would really love to invite all of you to please join me in that. It would really mean the world to me. Complete an act of kindness and tell me about it in my Facebook group. I'd really love to hear that. So thank you so much, everyone. Much love to you all. We will see you guys next time. Thank you for being.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone listening. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, David. Really lovely talking with you. You're doing some awesome
Pleasure.
work. So I'm happy to share it. Cool. Love you guys. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.